Let's talk about security assessment and testing. Now, by this point, you already know that organizations are facing growing cyber threats, and continuous assessment and testing helps us to stay ahead, help us to stay proactive, and find vulnerabilities before the enemies do. And through this, we can enhance the overall resilience of our cybersecurity controls. So, vulnerability assessment is just a process of identifying and evaluating security vulnerabilities, whether it's in form of weaknesses, flaws, or misconfigurations in our organization's infrastructure. And there's a process. You don't just go assess vulnerabilities and that's the end of it. There has to be a scope for the assessment, and we need to choose the appropriate vulnerability scanning tools that would work best for our own environment. And then we need to scan the environment, making sure that we are scanning everything that is within the scope so that we don't miss out and have any blind spots. And then we analyze the results and prioritize the vulnerabilities. Now, this is very important because analyzing the results help us to um, properly identify what actually applies in our environment. So tools might find some things that might not really be very relevant. So we need to analyze the results, filter through them, and also prioritize because chances are you can't fix everything, especially not at once. Um, so you want to make sure that you're prioritizing them based on the actual risk that they pose to your organization. And then, of course, you need to develop a remediation plan. You don't just go and submit it, and that's the end of it. We need to help the people, the organization, the people in IT, to really understand why these vulnerabilities are important, and also what are the steps to remediation. And then, of course, we implement the fixes and test to validate that the fixes have been implemented properly. Um, and then we have to like regularly assess for emerging threats. And of course, it's very important to document everything, and we need to educate and raise awareness, help people understand why this is important, but also help them understand what they need to do. Um, when it comes to red team versus blue team, so red team is just um, playing adversary and properly simulating a real incident by some people being assigned to the red team, which would be the adversaries, and then the blue team would be defenders. Examples of this are, CTF or capture the flag challenges, or sometimes it's about social engineering, and sometimes you might want to simulate something like a ransomware incident. Pen testing or penetration testing um, is a process of like trying to evaluate the security posture of an organization by acting as the adversary and testing vulnerabilities within a particular scope. Usually, there are specific objectives that have been set out, and it will be the responsibility of the pen testers to try to achieve those objectives by identifying weak points and trying to exploit vulnerabilities. And of course, there needs to be proper documentation, and there needs to be um, a prioritization of what vulnerabilities are most important. With security audits, um, we use these things to ensure compliance with standards and regulations. And we have standards like ISO 27001, which is for information security management system. We have the NIST cybersecurity framework, and we have the PCI DSS, which is for payment card industry. Now, you can't just implement a particular standard and believe that, oh yeah, we implemented it, we are compliant. You have to properly validate that you're actually compliant. And to do this, you would need a security audit so that you can identify what the gaps are in your implementation and properly fix them. So now, risk assessment. This is a very important part of cybersecurity, regardless of which career path you choose, right? Regardless of which area of specialization you go into, we are always assessing risk. So, for instance, when evaluating potential threats, or when doing vulnerability assessments, or determining the potential impact of security incidents, we need to do risk assessments. So risk is just likelihood and impact. So what's the likelihood of something happening and what's the impact? If it has a high likelihood and a high impact, then of course it is a big risk. But if it has a low likelihood and a high impact, um, then it is something that would be, it's still a risk, right? If it happens, but it has a very low likelihood, so it's not as much of a risk. So it's very important for us to prioritize our investments in security and risk mitigation strategies, because every single thing we do costs something. It costs money, time, resources. So we need to make sure that we're putting the resources in the right place. Just to conclude, security assessment and testing help us to have a more robust cybersecurity strategy. And when we do vulnerability assessments, pen testing, security audits, and things like that, it helps us to strengthen the security posture of our organization. And when we embrace a proactive approach to security assessments, this helps us to stay resilient in the face of ever evolving cybersecurity threats, because we are always aware of our weaknesses, we're always aware of our posture, and we can use that information to stay prepared against threats. Thank you, and we'll meet in the next lesson.